It was November of 2006. I was a 16-year-old kid living in the town of Altoona, Iowa. I went to bed early one night because I had to work the early shift at McDonald's. As I slept, I had a dream that I was running through downtown Des Moines, but I wasn't on a job. I was running from something. As I ran around the corner of a building, I came face to face with my pursuer, a tall man wearing a trench coat and a top hat in front of me. The only thing visible of his face was his eyes. They were abnormally large with black pupils, and it looked at me as if it wanted something. After what felt like hours, he reached out his bony hand, as if he wanted me to go with him. I woke up violently from my dream, and after catching my breath, I peered around my room to see if I was safe. As I stood up from my bed, I noticed that I could see my breath. Feeling confused, I checked my window. It was latched shut. I then walked over and checked my vent. I could still feel warm air coming from it. As I sat back down on my bed, I tried to figure out what exactly was going on. That's when the figure from my dream appeared at the foot of my bed. I scrambled back to my headboard. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to hide the shakiness in my voice. With the same bony finger, it pointed at me. Growing up in a religious home, I believed what I was looking at was a demon. I told the creature to leave. It just waved its finger at me, and with a low voice, it spoke to me.
"Never leave. Always here."
The creature then screamed loudly and disappeared. A feeling of nausea came over me, and I vomited on my floor. The last thing I remember was cleaning myself up and waking up to my alarm. It's been about a month since I had seen the top hat wearing man in my bedroom. The Christmas season was in full effect. My parents weren't home because they got invited to some kind of event, so it was only me and my 3 sisters at home. I had to wake up early in the morning for work, so I decided to go to sleep. I rested my head on my pillow and closed my eyes. Not even 30 seconds passed until my sisters burst into my room and started singing obnoxious songs. This, of course, made me very angry, but I thought if I ignored them that they would leave me alone. This was not the case. As I pulled the blankets over my head, I started to feel the same cold feeling that I had in November. As the obnoxious singing subsided, I lowered the blanket below my eyes and saw the man standing in the corner of my room. In one swift motion, he charged towards me, and I blacked out. When I finally came to, I found that my sisters had locked themselves inside the bathroom. As I knocked on the door, they told me to go away. I asked them what happened, and all they could say was Mom and Dad were on their way home. I looked down and saw that my hand was slightly bloody. Holes were in the bathroom door, and a broom was sticking out of the wall. I then walked into the living room and found that there were knives stuck into the wall as well. The same wave of nausea passed over me, just like in November, and I threw up again. As I was cleaning up, my parents walked through the door. My father immediately walked over to me and gave me a good beating. Then he sent me to my room. I went to bed crying. Not from the beating. I was crying because of the confusion. I had no idea what was going on. The next morning, my sisters reluctantly sat next to me and told me what had happened. They said I got angry and chased them down and tried to hurt them. They said my eyes were red to the point where they thought I was bleeding from them. They said I sounded like a different person. In 2011, that was the last time I saw the top hat wearing man. I just moved into a new apartment, and after a long, stressful day of unpacking, I took a shower and got ready for bed. As I started to drift off, I could feel that cold feeling again. I lifted my head and saw the man standing in front of me. The man's eyes were red now. With a low voice, just like on that November night, he looked at me and said,
This story takes place when I was a junior high school student. One morning during summer vacation, after my father went to work, my mother and I decided to visit my maternal grandmother, who lived in a rural area. Since my grandmother's house was located in the countryside, getting there required making a left turn, then driving for 5 minutes through a narrow, one-car-wide, unpaved road. There were rice fields and forest on the sides of the unpaved road. As soon as we arrived, I greeted my grandmother, then went into my youngest uncle's room. I used to like visiting my grandmother's house because my uncle was a huge gaming fan, and his computer was much better than mine at home. So once I confirmed my uncle was at work, I turned on his computer and started playing Doom 3, which used to be the most popular game once upon a time. After playing the game for about an hour or two, my uncle returned from work. Upon his arrival, my grandmother asked him to take her grocery shopping, since my mother, my aunt, and I were visiting her house. So at about 7 p.m., they all drove to town to do some grocery shopping. I was super excited and waved goodbye to them. Since I think it is unnecessary to explain why I was excited, I'll just leave it. After enjoying about 90 minutes of free time, my uncle called. He said he was about to turn left on the road, but one of the front wheels was punctured, and asked me to bring him a new tire which was in the storage shed. As I said before, after making that left turn, it took about 5 minutes to drive through a narrow, unpaved single-lane road to see my grandmother's house, but it took about 20 to 30 minutes on foot. Now that I think about it, it was quite scary to walk on that road, especially at night. It had no streetlights and was surrounded by rice fields and forest. It was almost 9 p.m., and that area got quite dark at about 8 because it was in the country. So to be honest, I was really scared, but not wanting anyone to know I was a coward, I decided to go. I grabbed the tire, left the house, and started walking along the unpaved road. I could see my uncle shining his car's headlights toward me. That said, he was still quite far away from me, and the headlights looked like two big yellow dots. I was a bit relieved knowing my uncle and family were on the other end of this road, but the night was dark, which deepened my fear. You know, when you walk in the darkness, your eyes adjust, and you start to see unclear shapes. I felt like I could see someone standing in the rice field, and someone sitting down, resting his chin on his hands, and looking at me through the bushes. I broke out in a cold sweat and held my legs to keep them from shaking. It felt scarier than being alone on a pitch-dark night, and because of the fear and the delusion I had created, I remember feeling really dizzy. After walking for about 20 minutes, I looked towards my uncle's car and realized I was nearly there. Feeling happier, I rolled the tire faster. I rushed to hand over the tire to him as soon as possible, but saw something in front of me. I wasn't sure what it was because it was still a bit away from me, but it was something dark. Suddenly, I felt strange and slowed down. Since I wanted to determine what it was while still having some distance, I strained my head and neck trying to look carefully, but it was too dark. Although I was scared, I started to walk again, thinking, nothing is going to happen because I have my uncle and family about 300 meters away. But when I got closer to it, I stopped because it became clearly visible. It was an old woman squatting with her mouth open, looking at the rice fields. I could only see the side of her face, but my whole body shivered because her blank facial expression with her mouth open was now clearly visible in the darkness. Without realizing it, I walked really close to the old woman. For reasons I don't understand, walking by without saying anything seemed even scarier, so I started talking to her. With a frightened voice, I asked, "Excuse me, what are you doing here at night?" But she did not respond and kept looking at the rice field. On the verge of crying, I shouted, "Excuse me!" She then looked at me, and I felt my heart tightening. Even though it was dark, I could clearly see she had permed white hair, and I could only see the white parts of her eyes. The scariest thing were the huge wrinkles and stains covering her face and her wide open mouth. I felt strange, like I was going crazy while looking at her. I had eye contact, but was looking down while she was looking up at me. After a few moments of eye contact, she turned her body toward me. Oh my gosh, I thought she was sitting down, but realized she had no lower body. She only had a torso and head which was supported from the ground with 2 arms. A flood of thoughts crossed my mind, but I remember thinking, there is Satan right in front of me. I felt like she was going to run into me with her 2 arms if I didn't move, so I grabbed the tire in my arms and sprinted with my eyes closed tightly. Without remembering how long I'd been running, I suddenly felt relieved. It was the next morning, and I was in my grandmother's room. When I asked my mother what happened, she said she was waiting for me in the car and saw me sprinting with my head down, holding the tire in my arms, and suddenly fell off the road, causing my family to come out of the car shocked. After listening to my mother, I told her and my other family members what I went through. Thinking I had suffered a heat stroke, that evening my grandmother made me chicken soup. My uncle told me to stop playing horror games and wouldn't let me play Doom 3 anymore. From then on, I could only play a Star Wars racing game while staying at my grandmother's house. I still believe it was not a ghost that I saw that day. It was just an illusion caused by my mental weakness.